My name is Stony Samso. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Open Air. Um, for those of you who are not familiar with Open Air, we're a nonprofit organization. Our headquarters is based in Missoula, Montana, but we work collaboratively with lots of wonderful organizations, and we're here today with American Prairie, with most of our folks on the ground at American Prairie, and we're going to kind of introduce a little bit more about the project shortly. Open Air's primary program is a place-based artist in residence program. And for those of you who are not familiar with residency programs, artist in residence programs, they provide time and space for artists to work, to contemplate, to connect to their practice, maybe to connect with other artists, and to create new works. Our program's fairly unique in that we're working, in addition to creating that time and space, we're also working together with other partners to connect artists with unique spots. And as I mentioned, we are here today with American Prairie. And maybe let's take a moment actually to bring everybody into the room who's going to be in conversation today, so we know who we're all with today. Corey, can I pass it to you? Will you introduce yourself and continue on along?
Happily, yes. Thank you, Stony. I'm Corey Williamson. I'm the Senior Outreach Manager at American Prairie. And it's just been a joy and an honor for me to get to work with Open Air to host Artists in Residence for the first time this year. American Prairie is a nonprofit conservation organization working since 2001 to protect, restore, and share a vast grassland ecosystem in central Montana, made up of a little over 3 million acres, anchored around the Charles M. Russell Wildlife Refuge. And this is an incredibly varied landscape of breaks country, of shortgrass prairie, of sagebrush steppe, in 7 different counties across the center part of the state. And so getting to welcome artists to this place in collaboration with Open Air has just been a real treat. And I'm excited for you to meet the artists. I'll show a couple of images here in a few minutes of some of the places that they've been and time that they've spent out here after they introduce themselves.
Thanks, Corey. And actually, let's bring Kelly into the room for a second, and then we'll have the artists introduce themselves too. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. My name is Kelly Sinner. I'm the program coordinator with Open Air, and I was lucky enough to get to go visit everybody on the prairie. So it's really, really exciting to be here today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Delia, will you start with your introduction?
Yeah, I'm Delia Touche. I primarily live in Fargo, North Dakota. I am a Sisseton, Wahpeton, and Dakota and Assiniboine artist. I primarily work in printmaking, bookmaking, and quilting. My pronouns are she, they. What else? It's beautiful out here in the prairie. My background isn't fake. Melissa, why don't you go next? Because I see you first.
Okay, I'm Melissa Kwasny. I am primarily a poet. I was Montana Poet Laureate with my friend M.L. Smoker from 2019 to 2021. I have a lot of books, and I'm just really happy to have had this opportunity.
Thanks, Melissa. And then Brandon.
Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Reinches. I'm an image maker, a painter and a printmaker, and I work as a curator. So I'm really lucky that I get to think about and make art all the time. And this is the first residency that I've done in a number of years. So I'm really grateful both to Open Air and to American Prairie for allowing it to happen. Thank you all.
Thanks, Brandon. And I want to extend the circle of bringing a little more into the room. As a place-based program interested in the connection between people, place, and creativity, we acknowledge and honor the stewardship of Indigenous people connected to the area that's now referred to as Montana. Open air programming in its full takes place in the territories and traditional homelands of the Salish, Pend d'Oreille, Blackfeet, Ani, Kootenai and Kalispell people. And we wish to honor the many generations that have been in close relationship with this region that so many of us are fortunate to call home. Borrowing from the Long Now Foundation, I find myself reflecting on the many who've cared for this place and the animate and natural world connected to it for the last 10,000 years. I'm thinking of those who tend to this place now and those who will steward it in the next 10,000 years to come. I'd like to invite all of our folks who are joining us today to acknowledge the indigenous communities connected to the land where you are joining us from. And so if you have a moment and you feel connected to it, please drop your notes in the chat, please. And I think that that's a nice bridge point too. I'd like to invite Corey to share a little bit more about American Prairie, anything else that would kind of ground or contextualize this residency and maybe tee up for everybody what this experience has been for the artists over the last 2 weeks.
Thanks so much, Stony. Yeah, so I'll do a little map work since I have this handy dandy map behind me, and then I'll just share my screen and show a couple of images of where the artists have been. Let's see. So at the bottom here, you can see this map of the state of Montana. American Prairie works in this sort of central part here. That's the square blown up is this map behind me. So you can see the 1.1 million acre Charles M. Russell Wildlife Refuge running along the Missouri River corridor and around the Fort Peck Reservoir. You can also see the Upper Missouri River Breaks National Monument right here, which is around 380,000 acres. And then these dark and light blue sections represent properties that American Prairie owns or manages. So this is a big landscape out here, really diverse, really remote. So these guys may share in a few minutes that they got to experience Central Montana's notorious gumbo, which is just a great stopper of all motion. But they visited 2 different locations during their residency. They spent some time out here on the PN. I think you guys can see that a little bit, but this is incredible sort of breaks country where the Judith River flows into the Missouri River. There's a very classic, beautiful canoe float from Coal Banks to Judith Landing that if it's not on your bucket list, it should be. So these folks spent a week out here living in a yurt that is rentable and available for visitors coming to American Prairie. And then they traveled up 191 across the bridge here at James Kip through the refuge and down and out over to this property, our Sun Prairie property, which is a really kind of just classic, beautiful, vast rolling prairie ecosystem. And it's also where about 400 bison call home. So I'm just going to show a couple of images to set the stage so you can kind of feel like you know where our artists were and what things looked like for them. Let's see if I can successfully do a screen share. Can you all see those images? Awesome. Okay, so this is a view of the PN. So again, this is just Missouri Breaks country. This is the Judith River corridor. The Judith River is this just exquisite undammed stream running through really beautiful intact cottonwood galleries. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a tiny elk sort of down in the middle lower left corner there. There's an elk herd on this property. There's prairie dog towns. There are incredible bird populations. And I think you'll hear more from the artists about some of the just animals and things that they encountered out there. But this was a morning walk that I took the day that the artists arrived out there while the cottonwoods are all in their gold glory. And again, they stayed in what we call our Myers hut system. So there are 2 yurts and a cabin. This one is kind of tucked into that cottonwood gallery along the Judith. And again, I hope they'll share some stories about their time in this space together, because I think it was very just communal and quiet. And it was really great to have these 3 out there as a cohort together. And I think that they did a lot to support one another and enjoy the place together. So they spent a full week there, and then we made that transition to this other property north of the Charles M. Russell Wildlife Refuge and north of the Missouri River. This is our Enrico Science and Education Center. There are no buffalo in this picture, but they have just been surrounded by buffalo all week long, and I think that's been as it always is, a special experience. We also, on their first day here, were able to introduce them to our longtime friend and collaborator, George Horsecapture Jr. Jr. is Ani from the nearby Fort Belknap Indian community, and he spent a day with us exploring some of the indigenous sites and cultural resources on the prairie. So we visited Medicine Rock, which is a huge glacial erratic just out there in the grassland that's been visited and carved for thousands of years. And then we also visited Buffalo Jump, which is what you can see in this picture. So it was really great to introduce folks to the history of this landscape, which goes back hundreds of generations of indigenous peoples and plains tribes using and stewarding the prairie. And then much more recent history of ranching families and the Prairie Union schoolhouse out here that just sort of gives a little slice of what life was like for people out on the prairie for many years. And then, of course, we got some time with our bison herd. So my colleague Scott Heidebrink, our director of bison restoration, gave these guys an evening tour to get safely up close with a vehicle to some of our bison. And I think that's just been another really wonderful piece of being on this property, is spending time near and around these animals and seeing how they behave and how they move across a place that was their home for thousands and thousands of years. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And yeah, I hope that brings you close in a little bit and gives you a sense of the place. And now I think, Stony, should we hear from the artist? Should I throw a question out there, or
yeah, let's get a question going.
Okay. So I was sharing a little bit of this with Melissa this morning, but there's a quote from Willa Cather, who wrote My Antonia and is kind of a classic writer of the prairie. And she said that anyone can love the mountains, but it takes a soul to love the prairie, which is nothing against mountains. And in fact, I tend to feel more at home in mountain landscapes. And I'm a little bit of a newcomer to the prairie myself. I've lived in this ecosystem for about 2.5 years. But I do notice that kind of special attention that the prairie takes, and its subtle drama and the way it just kind of asks you to lean in and to slow down. And I also love being surprised by the prairie. So in my time here, I've been surprised by the way prairie potholes change color in the fall and are their own kind of ecosystem of color and plants. I've been surprised by the way 200 buffalo can disappear in a landscape that you thought was flat and had no topography. And surprised by just all the little connections and communications happening across the prairie ecosystem. And so I'd love to hear from our three artists, what surprised you out here? What kind of made you slow down and look closer about the prairie and the landscape or the ecosystem or the history here? So I'll let one of those three jump in.
Well, I'll start. I'm going to throw a quote back at you. This is the first week we were at the PN. I was reading a book I had read before just to center myself in the direction of reverie. It's a book by Gaston Bachelard called The Poetics of Reverie. And he says, all the being of the world, if it dreams that it is speaking. And the speaking here was not what I expected. I thought this would be a quiet place and an emptier place. We often talked about, Brandon and I did, Delia knows the prairie more, but that we expected it to be flat, and we didn't expect all these folds and crevices and places to hide, but also how in such an expanse, the living beings showed themselves quite often. That we saw so many different kinds of birds and animals that when you were out walking by yourself, the prairie is much more alive than it looks from a distance.
We ended up using a lot of words like how soft things were. We thought it was a harsh landscape. And especially at the PN, I think we
Brandon, somehow you're muted. I think you lost your volume, your voice.
did it cut out right in the middle.
It sure did, but you're back now.
We talked about how I don't even remember what I was going to say. How soft everything was. We assumed it was a harsh landscape, and as we started walking, everything had a softness to it and a roundness to it. It was really something else, and it was amazing. Like Melissa said, how much everything was present, all sorts of animals and experiences.
I guess I would echo a lot of what Melissa and Brandon said. It's just like it's so beautiful out here too. I'm outside and I look at it and think of like how amazing and wonderful it is. And even like I look across the yard and I see like 3 bison. And that's just like, wow, dreams coming true. And then I feel like I surprised bison more than they surprised me. I get too close on my bike and then they run away.
That's one thing that's surprising is the bison presence. I mean, they have, obviously they have spatial presence. They're so huge. And I was telling Corey this morning, they're not predators and yet they're so imposing. But they're also amazing. There's these zones that you can get, how close can you get to them, 300 feet maybe, when they start showing you that they recognize that you're there, and you don't try to avoid them, but sometimes you're walking and there's a bison right in front of you. It's an amazing experience to have.
I'd like to hear about y'all's practice. Like how did you spend your time? How did you engage in these different spaces through the lens of your practice? Yeah, let's start there.
I can start. I guess like what I did mostly is just like go out there and spend time with the land as much as I could. Just like being here is so amazing, and having my bike is also a treat. And then I took a bunch of like Polaroids too. Here's my stack of like the different properties and different areas I'd walk to, different animal tracks. And I was also trying to prototype a book that I would like to make of these Polaroids, because I have almost 50 of them. So I've been workshopping that, and then I've been thinking about the color schemes of the land too, and how I can incorporate that into like some of the quilting I do. I'll also screen share some stuff I've been thinking about. I was like trying to draw quilts, but Photoshop made my life easier. Here's one I'm like was thinking about. Scott, the director of the Bison Restoration, he was talking about how there's 360 sunsets out here, and I like really like that. And then this one too, just thinking, I got the colors from some pictures I took of the sunsets out here because they're so amazing and there's so many colors. And I mentioned how the sunset and the sky just has a rainbow roll to it, like the blending of different colors and variations in that. Yeah, so these are like quilts that I'm thinking about making. And so this is kind of like a draft, and now I just have to make the physical object. Let's stop sharing.
I think we all had a lot of similarities and a lot of differences too in how we approached making, and a lot of times it shifted a little bit when we came to Sun Prairie, but we usually started in the morning, kind of gathered around the stove and warming up and drinking coffee and talking, and then we'd all go different ways, different directions. And we ended up, we'd go for a walk or a bike ride. And then we'd usually gather again in the afternoon and see each other kind of in passing. But it was a lot of like splintering off and then coming back together. And then one thing we didn't do here, we all made food together, but different meals. But at the PN, we often cooked meals together. And so it shifted a little bit when we switched properties. But like Delia said, it was a lot of being outside and a lot of hikes and a lot of walking around and a lot of observing and immersing ourselves, and then making work either a little bit in the afternoon or the evening, kind of as a response or maybe a reflection. I think that was fair.
Brandon, can you speak a little bit more about your process? Like, do you like navigation and wayfinding seem like themes that are recurring in your work and interesting to be out in space? Can you speak a little bit kind of personally to your like how your time out on the prairie dovetailed with themes that you negotiate?
Well, I didn't bring a compass, of course, and I didn't bring oftentimes I didn't even bring my phone or the Avenza app or a map, and just kind of wandered. And it was really strange. Melissa talked about poetics of reverie, and it was kind of, we were stuck in this place of wandering and wondering, and it would be, hours of walking and thinking and kind of forgetting a little bit about what you were doing or where. Everything was so relaxed, and you had so much time and space just to kind of wander around and think, and then see what occurred to you. That was really a generous part of the residency, was that that process of just wandering. The work here I ended up making was pretty different than anything I've made before, and it was strange, but it was fun. It was just different, and it took a long time. I kept trying to force it the first couple of days, like, oh, I'm supposed to be making art. And it took a long time of just kind of walking around and having those experiences and falling into the flow. And then when we moved, I felt like I finally had a little bit of a flow at PN along the Judith River. And then switching here, there's a day of travel and then a kind of a day of touring around, and then to get back into that headspace again. I thought, this is completely different. And it ended up not being so different as I thought. I kind of made an artificial difference and just kind of let it go. As soon as I started getting out and walking around, it helped.
That makes me think of Rebecca Solnit's Wanderlust. If I may insert a quote also into this quote fest. She says, "I like walking because it is slow, and I suspect that the mind, like the feet, works at about 3 miles an hour. If this is so, then modern life is moving faster than the speed of thought or thoughtfulness. Perhaps walking is best imagined as an indicator species, to use an ecologist term." So.
That sounds right.
Melissa, how about you? How was this time for your practice? How did you integrate the days into your creative process?
Did you just ask me?
Did you hear that?
No, you were cutting out, so I couldn't hear what you were saying.
Sorry about just offering the question to you, Melissa. How did this time here inform your creative process and practice?
Mm-hmm. I at first, and one thing I thought was, this is the perfect creative day. That for me, and I haven't had it for a while, and it reminds me that this is the process that works best for me. But which means that I get up really early, I go outside right away. I love this idea of when you're at a place-based residency like this one, like American Prairie, we're outside a lot. Like I get up at like 5:30 or 6, go outside and see what's going on in the stars. And then, it's easy to walk outside. And then there's no street lights. And so, then you go for a long walk. Then in the evening, you go out. You go out and see the dawn. It's just outside, which is one of my preferences for a way to live. And so get up and write by hand for a couple hours. And then I'd meet these guys and we'd have good conversations, go off by myself for looking for all kinds of encounters and writing outside often. The thing that's different and then reading a lot. The thing that's different is I didn't bring my laptop because in the first week we were there, we were in these yurts and there was only solar power and we thought. So I thought it was, and we also didn't have running water. And so I went, okay, I'm writing by hand. I'm going into the non-running water part of being a poet and writing by hand. And so then when because most of my time I'll spend the whole afternoon working on a laptop crafting something. So because I didn't have that, I wrote a lot by hand. So that happened. And then one quick thing is I decided every day I would pick 7 words really quick about one of the places I was. And then I would just write them down without thinking. And then I'd rearrange them in all the different configurations they can go. And so I have a lot of those poems. Tiny little poems, snapshots.
I was going to say with Melissa, we often saw every sunrise and every sunset. Dawn would come and you'd be up and you kind of see it start in the soft glow, and that kind of framed the day. And at PN, we had less technology. You did have your phone and you could take photos, but you didn't really get a signal. And we had to drive somewhere if we needed to check email, if there was an emergency. And here it was different at Prairie, Sun Prairie, and technology kind of had a different relationship and it created a different rhythm. But I think we still framed the day with the sun.
Mm-hmm.
Something that strikes me as I hear you each speaking is the word "we" being used so often. You were in close quarters for the first week of it, and even the second week, and we think of our creative practices as very personal and perhaps of the self. I'm curious how your experience being in relationship and proximity to one another kind of was part of this experience for you.
Now when Julia's stomach rumbles, I get hungry.
Oh my God. I was like, can you hear it? I was like, I'm pretty used to it. I just finished grad school and like some of us live together. So I'm like, this is normal for me. You just better do your dishes.
Yeah, it was new for all of us. And it could have gone so sideways. I mean, I think if there were other people than the ones we had, I mean, we were sharing a space of what, just because the bedrooms it was too cold to work back there. There was no studio space that first week. So we all had to work within, together with these 2 tables and being outside. So, but it was amazing. It was amazing. Everyone gave each other the solitude, I think, that we needed. And if we didn't have it, we'd just walk out the door, go take a walk.
There was a lot of respect, and usually people would check in with each other, like, do you mind if I join you? Or do you want to do this together? Or, just kind of checking in. And it worked itself out really well. I think there was plenty of together time, and we all took time to be by ourselves.
I thought about you guys a lot after we dropped you off at the PN, and just as you're saying how sideways it could have gone, and also I think how magical it has been instead, and just what a neat cohort you are together. And I have a feeling that there will be kind of tendrils of others' experience and the perspective of your fellow artists that sort of seep in to whatever comes from this residency. And that's really neat for me to think about. And I was talking to Melissa this morning, and we were joking about, as I think you all have been for the last week or so, about disruptions and the idea of disruption. And that, when you come to someplace sort of distant and remote, and especially if you're putting aside a phone or a laptop or technology, there's a very different kind of disruption, but there's also welcome disruption, right? That kind of shakes the snow globe or sends you on a path that you didn't expect, or just opens up a window. And so I'd be curious to hear from you all about what kind of disruptions you encountered in your time, whether that was a positive impact on your work and your experience, or if it truly was something that kind of sent you off someplace you didn't necessarily want to go.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'd call it a disruption, but like some mornings, like, or in the middle of the night, I wake up and the coyotes are like talking to each other. And I was like, oh, or I like wake up and the owls are hooting. And I think that was cool, just sort of like waking up to that instead of my alarm, which I did leave on the first night.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar, that the animals were the disruption, and that's a weird thing to say because it wasn't unwelcome. But everything stopped. Oftentimes we'd say, "Oh, look, there's turkeys that are right outside the yurt," or "Do you want to go walk and listen to the elk?" Or "There's some coyotes close by. Let's go find them," or something like that. So we stopped a lot of what we were doing and paid attention to the animals, but it wasn't a negative disruption. It was an enhancing thing. I don't think there was very many negative disruptions.
Yeah,
So-
I'd like to say, sorry, Brandon, did I cut you off? That I had ideas about what I was going to read when I was there, and what I was going to think about, and that completely changed. I ended up not reading some of the things I thought I was going to read because, for one thing, I ended up reading about a fantastic book about coyotes, and a book about whitetail, and then over here, things I don't usually read, and I learned a lot that way. But also Delia and Brandon's a hunter, and he sees things so differently, and here's I thought I was a really good animal spotter, but compared to him, he can hear and see them in the distance, and recognizes tracks and fossils and all kinds of things that made me pay attention in a different way. And Delia, her sense of color is amazing, makes me see color differently. And I have to say how happy she was when we got here to American Prairie and she saw the buffalo. It was just joy, and to see somebody react with it like that was kind of amazing.
So I'm curious about actually I want to kind of give a little context for the folks who are joining us today too. So Delia, Brandon, and Melissa have been out on the prairie for 2 weeks now, and this actually marks the ending of their residency as we know it at this moment. So it's kind of, I'm interested in how you're feeling right at this moment, because you're in a liminal like portal back to civilization mode, and I'm curious where what that is for you, and also you know, some context. This is our first time in collaboration with American Prairie doing a residency. As Corey showed you at the beginning, this is a huge area. There's so many nodes of connection and interest, and somebody could do a residency out there for 2 years and still not have everything absorbed into their senses. And so we thought, well, let's start small and also afford some time. So we're inviting folks back in the year for a week to kind of reconnect and maybe pick up on a thread that they are excited to explore further. So I'm kind of curious, do you have a thread that has inspired you, that you're excited to pursue, or is this something you're going to need to sit with as you return to civilization? So I'm laying out 2 questions for you. How are you feeling right now, as you are in the middle of this or about to embark on this transition? And then is there something that is on your mind that you're looking towards as a point of contemplation, or to bring into your studios with you?
I guess, oh man, I haven't really thought about it. I'm a doer and less of a thinker sometimes. But I'm kind of am sad to leave because it's such a beautiful day, and we had a couple days of rain, so we were stuck inside. And I'm kind of sad to leave the bison. They're so cute and so powerful. And yeah, their presence is just so there. So I loved having time there. And like, I didn't even have to leave the house. They just show up sometimes. And that was so amazing. So yeah. What was the second part of the question?
Is there a thread you're bringing into your studio, something you're looking forward to, kind of the stone
Oh
you're
yeah.
bringing?
Well, I was like talking to Corey about like the sounds, and then how like on one of our tours with George Horse Capture Jr., who was like the bison have their own language. And I was like, wow. And so do the prairie dogs, and so do the coyotes. And then so I kind of started recording the coyote sounds when I could catch them. And like, how can I incorporate sound into my work maybe, or just like re-listening to them?
Did we lose Melissa?
Oh no, she's right. She's with Corey.
She joined me. Speaking of, you know, technology disruptions, her phone died. So now she's with me.
Rough.
Okay, good. Yeah, everything here happened unexpectedly, and I ended up being pretty contemplative and really enjoyed my time. And I ended up doing about 13 drawings in the 10 working days. We had a lot of transition days and a lot of travel days. And it was really interesting to think about. I did a set of drawings, 5 drawings over at PN, and maybe I'll pull some up if I can remember how to screen share. And this is one from. It didn't work to make paintings. It was really hard to make paintings. I brought a bunch of big canvas and acrylic. And this was a large draw, the little sag that was right behind the PN, and they ended up kind of being. You can see the mirroring and the twinning there. They're almost like Rorschach pieces, and I thought that was one thing that was happening. That was only happening at the PN, and then I ended up I struggled here and ended up doing a bunch of feather paintings, and I'll pull up one of those, and they ended up being very similar. This one might be sideways. Yeah, turn your head to the right. and they're pretty abstract, and they still have that same mirroring together, and it ended up working for me to do these ink washes on gessoed paper rather than drawings. Everything I did ended up being black and white, which surprised me. I brought a lot of color with me, and so something about that, something about what we were doing, that was just what happened, and I ended up kind of doing these pieces that had a lot of the same forms, I guess, like things coming together into a central ribbon, like a river, or a lot of the trails did that. There's multiple trails that kind of came together. Even antlers, we had a lot of antlers sitting on shelves, and they had those branched things that came to a central tine, and then the trees and the cottonwoods felt that way. And I started seeing that form over and over again everywhere we looked. It was like the drainages, the gulches, the pathways, the waterways, and then even in the feathers, in the feather motifs, and the spots, and kind of the way they're aligned along a central quill. And so all that was pretty unexpected, and I have no idea what to do with that. It's going to take a lot of digesting.
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. And Melissa, how about you?
What am I going to do? I have a whole notebook of material, and I don't know how it's going to be crafted. I think the way I usually work is I have a lot of things and see where they cluster, how they cluster together. And so the notes I've been taking here, a lot of things written outside, not merely description, but kind of listening to see what I'm seeing, but also what I'm hearing, internal, external, but also discussions we've had, like those mornings where we would talk a lot. The word colonialism came up over and over again. And so thinking about the history of colonialism, especially here on the prairie, and seeing these buffalo, which is just does something to your heart to see them moving so naturally through. But also ideas about restoration and rewilding, because that's a kind of new concept for me, and thinking about not being able to go back to something, but going forward in a different way. And so, of course, we're all thinking about that right now in our times with war. It's been quite a week. It was amazing to not have internet for a week and then come back and see everything that happened while we were in in a beautiful place, kind of oblivious, but also climate change. And so those are big concepts, I know, but I think this is a step toward my work dealing with that on a more conscious level.
I'm going to share a quick photo, and this is one of the places that we visited. Each one of us visited, and it was a place where a bison had died, and the whole spine and hips were there. The head wasn't there, but it was in the middle of a prairie dog town, and it had been picked clean by coyotes. And American Prairie's policy is leave on the land, leave these bones on the land, and it was just. It was kind of startling. It was like as powerful as coming across like a whale carcass or something. It was just immense, and it had. I haven't quite figured it out, but it was the relationship to the land that we were all able to have was pretty intense, and instances like that really heightened that relationship. So I think we're still kind of figuring it out, but there was amazing things like that happened over and over and over again. That little pile of bones almost felt like a pilgrimage site where we would go back every couple of days and walk over to it, or at least I did. I think we all visited it at different times.
I tried to go back, but I couldn't find them. There's just so many prairie dog towns. I was like, I can't see them.
I just want to note we have about 10 minutes remaining, and I want to again invite any of the folks who are joining us, if you have any questions you'd like to ask, to drop those in the chat. Corey, did you have anything that you wanted to? I know you had a couple of questions.
Mostly, I just want to put my fellow poet on the spot. I just made Melissa go grab her notebook. Yeah, well, maybe folks in the audience are thinking about what they might want to ask. Is there anything you would want to read and share with us, Melissa?
Yeah, but these are my little poems, and also because she's my fellow poet, I want to say one of the nicest mornings we had at the PN was we got up and Corey was still there, and she read us this poem called meditation, and it like a poem can do, it kind of set our attention, it set the energy in the room, but also in the beginning of something. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I have these little ones. They don't all work, but here's a couple of them. And it's just one word on every line and 7 words. And sometimes I cheat and put an article in it. Sage smell, day clear, heart outlet, less willing, hard pan. Here's one for just one day that we were here. Mist turned drizzle, boots heavy with 2-track mud. Slow rain, slow rain, weed pulling the earth smell up. Wind chorus, agitated leaf crickets, rattling alive. Nothing sad as a drowned kestrel in a stock tank. It was really sad when I found the kestrel in the stock tank.
There should be a little ladder to help it out, and there was not.
Yeah, something about drowned birds. They just go, it's so sad.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Melissa.
Mm-hmm.
Those are really neat.
Oh, you're leaving us with a drowned bird.
We can't end there.
Oh, maybe. Okay, I'll find one more. October prairie blackens the stotting bison calves again.
Did you guys learn the word stotting from Scott?
I did learn that. No, not from Scott. I think Brandon.
Brandon?
Oh.
Somebody mentioned it.
I want to stot.
Tell us what it is. I do want to stot.
Stot is what the mule deer do, that when they just bound away on all their legs, they're hopping. The whitetail don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And the buffalo do it.
They will do it sometimes.
Yeah.
They're prancing.
So with the few minutes we have left here together, gathered, is there anything that's on your minds that you care to share that we didn't bring up through questions, or questions you have for each other, questions you have for yourselves? What is still lingering?
I think I need to linger more and figure it out. The best answer I could give right now.
You know, one of the things that for us is as an arts organization, we kind of value and care about artists, art making, the creative process, creative practice. One of the things that we also think about is the value of creative people in our communities, like what's the extended value of creative practice. And so it's these partnerships help extend those circles, those ripples out into our communities. And I will say it's just wonderful to hear from each of your voices, the lens and the way you're thinking about space and this stone that you were turning over clearly, I mean, moment to moment. And so thank you for sharing your practice with us, and thank you, Corey, and all of our friends over at American Prairie for making this opportunity happen. And it's above and beyond your call of duty, and yet there's something that is enriching and delightful about making this magic happen, having you three in space together and traveling across the prairie and getting stuck in gumbo and listening to the coyotes and watching those tracks. And each of those moments along the way and your ability to share that with us is enriching and precious. I also want to give a big shout out and thank you to Laura Barrett Family Foundation Fund for their support of this project. They really made this happen. And so our deep appreciation to them and for their vision with this project as well. As I had mentioned earlier, because this is experimental, because we're learning about what we're doing as collaborative organizations, about what it means to bring artists to remote areas on the prairie and help move them safely and support them during their time together, we do have kind of extended vision into next year about points of engagement. And so we anticipate there being an exhibition that happens that showcases their work. We anticipate hopefully some community engagement opportunities. We'll stay kind of coy about the details at this moment in time, but for everyone who's joining us, we'll be sure to keep you in the loop with what is to come from these artists. What else? Corey, anybody have any parting thoughts on your end?
Sure. Just thank you to everybody who has come. Thank you to our artists. Obviously American Prairie is a wild, rugged place, and we are working to restore and rewild this landscape, but also to share it. And I think this has just been a really powerful reminder to me that people are part of the prairie. And I think it was special for all of us to get to go out with Junior, with George Horsecapture Jr., and I'm thinking about the day we spent together where we visited the Medicine Rock, which again is this huge glacial erratic that's been carved for thousands of years out on the prairie. And Junior talked about that rock as a living being, and he referred to it as he. And Junior said, can you think about all the prayers that he has heard? And can you think about all the requests that he has known? And can you think about all the gratitude and the thanks that he has known? And so it's neat for me to think about that very, very deep history of this place, and that people have always been a part of it, and getting to share it with artists, getting to share it with people who are interested in that deep past and that far future, and those just kind of exquisite and subtle stories has just been really special. So thank you, Brandon, Melissa, and Delia, and thank you to Open Air, to Stony and Kelly.
Well, it's been wonderful. I wish you all safe travels back to your respective homes. It would be interesting to talk to you in 2 days and hear how civilization is treating you. I know you've kind of had a soft reentry now that you have a relationship with the internet again and running water. It's amazing the kind of opportunity for what the spaces we can fill when certain things are removed. But welcome back to civilization. Thank you for sharing your practices with us. Thank you everybody today for joining us. Please stay tuned. We'll be sure to follow up. All this was recorded, so we should send you a link to the final recording. Feel free to share with anybody you think might be interested in this kind of project. And again, thanks to our friends over at American Prairie for your support in making this happen.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Oh, no, okay. I'm not on mute. You never know.
Yep, Delia.